All right, in the second half of the video, let's talk about some of the keys to successful outlining. What makes and what causes an outline to be a tool that's really helpful for you? Let me suggest that there are three things that we want to focus on in terms of successful outlining. The first is timing. And the takeaway that I want you to get from the discussion of timing is that don't wait. Outlining is something that is better done on a regular basis when it's fresh in your mind. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Second, content, what should be in the outline. And the takeaway I want you to have here is you want to summarize versus copying. And we'll talk about that. Third, the concept of confirming your work. Make sure that your outline is accurate. All those three things help contribute to success. So let's talk about each of them. All right, first, timing. When should you be outlining? Let me suggest that at the very least, you ought to be thinking about generating your outline after each syllabus section. When you look at the syllabus, you see that there are Roman numerals. The first one was about intellectual property, copyright and trademarks, as an example of what is property. Then we have personal property. Then we have real property. Then we have landlord-tenant. All those separate sections can be good places to say, I need to do my outline now that we've completed that section in our class. All right? Some people want to do it on a more regular basis than that, and it's up to you. But at the very least, think about doing it in connection with when you're done. And let me tell you why. There's a couple of good reasons why. First, if you're doing it on a regular basis, then the information is still fresh in your mind. You can still remember things like, oh, I remember we talked about that in class, or it was described this way. The farther away you get from class, the dimmer and dimmer those memories become, and you might not be able to recall those things. So if you do it while it's fresh in your mind, you have a better chance of getting a good capture of the information for purposes of your outline. And secondly, outlining is a way to make sure that you really got it. And if you didn't, if in trying to distill something in your outline, you discover that you didn't get it, then you have the ability to get help while it's still fresh in your mind. All right? So whether you want to choose, I'll do it every 2 weeks. I tried that in law school, which is a pretty aggressive thing that no matter where we're at, every 2 weeks I'm going to update my outline. Or whether you do it on sort of a section by section basis under the syllabus, you want to do it on a regular basis and don't wait. Because if you wait, the problem is that the mountain looks huge. If you're doing a little bit every time because you're doing it on a regular basis, then the amount that you have to put in your outline just seems smaller and it's less daunting. If you wait until far in the semester, it's going to look so huge that sometimes you get discouraged and you don't want to do it. And you don't want to be in that situation when you're trying to do your outline. All right? Okay, so that is timing. How about content? What should be in the outline? Now let me suggest a couple of things. First, an outline is not a copy of your class notes. If you think you're just going to take all your class notes and put one after another into a big long Word document and say that's my outline, you're not going to have a very good outline. Because there's a lot of things that we cover in class that don't need to be in your outline. They're important for our class discussion. But when we talk about what you need to know at the end of the semester, it's going to be more of a distillation of what we're talking about. So, what do I mean by that? Our focus in putting together an outline should be on extracting and summarizing the key concepts that come out during the readings and during our class discussion. All right? So, Well, what does that mean? Well, what's the rule? What are the elements to the cause of action, if that's what we're talking about? Right? What was the variations on the rule or the exceptions to the rule? What makes this element be satisfied versus this element not be satisfied? That's the focus. And that's where we want to be able to extract and have in your outline. Now, from this context, then the question becomes, well, what's the role of cases? How important are cases? Well, cases are important for our class discussion. Cases give us examples of how the rule is applied in the practice. Right? So they're important for our class discussion. But what you don't want to have is an outline that's just a bunch of cases. Right? Instead, you want to get those rules out. Now, does that mean that you don't have cases at all in your outline? Well, no, not exactly. And here's why. First, there are some cases that they are the rule. Okay? We're going to study a case later in the semester called Penn Central. And in Penn Central, the Supreme Court set forth 4 factors to consider to determine whether or not a government regulation constitutes a regulatory taking. Don't worry, we're going to study that. You'll learn what it means. All right? But it's known as the Penn Central test. All right? That case is, in essence, how you apply and think of the test. All right? But the vast majority of the cases that we read are merely being read because they are an example of the rule in action. And once we see that example, then the case has served its purpose. Right? So you aren't going to be including cases just because we read them. But the flip side of that is that sometimes a case can be a really good example for a small point. Think, for example, in found property, when we read Terry versus Locke. That's a really good example. The money that's left up in the ceiling of the hotel room, that's a very vivid example of mislaid property, right? Or think about, in the Terry versus Locke case, the court talks about a case in which money was hidden inside the wing of an airplane. Right? That's a great example of intentional placement, right? How the heck could the money get into the wing other than the fact that somebody took the wing apart, put it in there, and put the wing back together? Okay? Those are great, vivid examples that might help you to remember a particular concept. So they're helpful in that regard, but notice that we just talk about it in terms of the money was in the ceiling and that was mislaid because it showed evidence of intentional placement. That's what we get out of the case for purposes of an outline. So they can serve as examples that might help you remember how an element or a particular test might apply. But notice how we've really just distilled that case down to its very essence as an example. And it's much less than putting your whole case brief into the outline. All right? So cases are important for our class discussion. They're important as examples of the application of the rule. But you don't need to have a lot of discussion of cases in your outline, because that's not what's going to be focused on and what's important for your final exam, or ultimately the example of taking the bar exam. All right? So keep cases in their proper role. All right. Next, confirming. We want to make sure that our outline is accurate. So where can we go for confirmation? Well, you can talk to your fellow students, right? I highly recommend that all of you form or become part of a study group, because in study groups, you get to help each other learn by talking it through. Somebody doesn't understand something, somebody else in the group might understand it and be able to explain it. And then the roles might get reversed. Some other class, you understand it, but somebody else in your group doesn't. It's a great way to help each other learn the essential concepts that are going on in the class. All right, so your fellow students can be a good source. The podcasts can be a great way to confirm that what you wrote down in your outline is accurate. Asking me questions is another way of doing that, right? Now, there are also horn books. You know, if you go in the library, there are on reserve various study aids about particular topics. My suggestion with those is that you only use them as sort of a last resort. And here's the reason why. It takes a lot of time and effort to go find it and look it up and get the information out of it, compare it to what you've got and everything else. I would only go there if your other sources really haven't answered it for you very well. All right, so kind of think of them last. And then the last thing that I want to make here is to give you a caution. All right? You will be tempted, and temptation is the right word. You will be tempted to rely upon somebody else's work. Maybe somebody says, oh, I've got, upperclassman Joe Smith's outline from this class. Or you might see a commercial outline. PMBR, the Kaplan people, and Barbary have books that summarize concepts and things from first-year classes. All right? But here's the problem. Number one, they're not in this class. So that outline may or may not reflect what we just talk about in class. But number two, and probably more importantly, the essential benefit of an outline is that you learn by doing it. That by making the effort yourself to extract the concepts and then put it down into the outline, you are learning those concepts. You are burning them into your brain. And that's something that you will not get when you're simply taking somebody else's work and saying, oh, I'll just try to memorize that. I know it takes time. I know it's hard work. But it's really worth it because by spending the time to extract and summarize and put into an outline, you will learn the information much better than if you're going to rely on somebody else's work to do that. Okay? So really be cautious. You might use them to confirm what you got, but don't rely on them because you won't learn it as well as you would otherwise. All right? Now, here's the thing, and here's one of the great reasons why outlining is good. If you do them right, if you really extract the rules out and you understand those rules and you learn them, your outline will be the only thing you will need to study for finals. You can put aside your casebook. You can put aside all your class notes. The outline becomes the document by which you ultimately get yourself ready, get the information and the concepts and the rules into your head so that you can do well on the final. All right, I know it's hard work, but it's really worth it. And you will teach yourself, you will learn so much better if you make the investment of time and energy to put together a good outline. I hope that you will take this suggestion seriously because I really do believe that outlining can make you be a better student and a better lawyer.